This is actually a good point and deserves to be reiterated. AOC was on Don Lemon's show on CNN, and this is as good as an explanation as I've heard in terms of what we're dealing with. I mean, I met someone who actually is involved in shipping, and it was fascinating to hear how much more expensive now containers are to ship. And part of that was that during COVID, all of this, you had supply lines disrupted, but you also ended up sending stuff to different places around the world that didn't usually go there. For instance, you had PPE sent to countries that don't really export a lot of products. And so I'm sending 1,000 shipping containers to a country in, I don't know what countries it would be, but maybe on the coast of Africa, or I don't know, some other countries in Europe that don't necessarily export a lot of things. And those containers it's just not worth it to ship them back empty. But you end up increasing the price of shipping containers. And it is really just a question of, over time, there not being necessarily no slack in our production ability, but just we have to get logistics working again. The rental car situation is also very similar to that. But here is AOC on with Don Lemon.
You know, today, I'm sure you saw, what happened with the stock market. They said it was because of COVID, but there was lots of talk about inflation. So I want to talk about the fears of inflation. President Biden pushed back, assuring Americans that the price increases that they've seen hitting their wallets are temporary. Now, last week, you questioned the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and expressed concern over prematurely raising rates and what that could mean for marginalized communities. What are your biggest concerns over inflation, Congresswoman?
Well, here's the deal with inflation, is that if we do not get the root cause of these price increases right, then policy decisions could be made that could really negatively impact your life, boost unemployment, and again, increase interest rates. And we do not want that. So it's really important that we get the diagnosis right into what's going into these price increases. When you look at what actual prices are going up, it's in very specific sectors. If this was an overall inflationary issue, we would see prices going up in relatively equal amounts across the board, no matter what the good is. But we know what's getting expensive. Things like the cost of lumber, items like cars, whether they are new or used, and other sorts of items that rely on shipping and shipping containers coming in from overseas. These are very sector specific, which means that these are due to supply chain issues. That means that we don't have enough ports that can accommodate all of the backed up ships that are trying to come in. It's because we don't have enough computer chips that are produced by just a handful of factories in the world that go into these vehicles, which are then causing a rush on used vehicles. And it's because of all of the rush on demand to build and to remodel homes during lockdown. And the reason it's important for us to understand that is because the solution to that is, guess what? Infrastructure. Yeah. We need to put in more money and more funding so we expand ports so that we can add resilience to our supply chain. That's what we can do if we get it right. We actually support these infrastructure investments and make sure that we protect not just the size, but potentially make it bigger. Right. Now, if we get it wrong, if we say this is inflation, that this is an inflationary trend, et cetera, what's going to happen if we get it wrong? We put policy pressure and political pressure on the Fed to increase interest rates, which will drive up the rate of unemployment, which is the exact opposite thing that you want to be doing in such a fragile state of our economic recovery post-COVID. Okay. So that's why it's so important that we get this right and put the politics aside.
Yep. That's it. That's exactly the case.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great answer. I mean, she not only gets the dynamic correct, also throws in, builds it into the support of the infrastructure bill. But we should say, look, the Fed has a dual mandate, and they're at odds a little bit. And inflation is really not the threat that it was prior to our getting detached from gold, no longer pegging our currency to gold. It's not the same threat. And inflation, fears of inflation often are used as a mechanism to basically discipline labor and get into things like austerity. Don't fall into that trap. She addressed it very well. Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.